virtues on everyone. Well, we have to because they're Christian virtues here. As a Christian, God wants us to be able to think soberly with a sound mind, sound-mindedly, to think in a reasonable, clear fashion. You sometimes can see someone, you'll present them with options. Generally, it's God forbid you ever present an unstable person with more than one option, because then they have to pick. If you give them one, it's fine, but they'll just, I don't know what to do. 3 options, 4 options, I don't know what to do. And, well, breathing, perspiring, they don't know what to do. Give them one option. Make it easy on them. Make their day have a happy ending. No, really teach them on sound-mindedness, teach them the Christian virtue. Give them more than one option and they just don't know what to do. They don't have a stable mind. Or give them 3 and they pick one. And it seems a little shaky at the very beginning. Well, I know I made the wrong decision now. They ought to go ahead and see it out anyway. As long as it's not going to cost you your life or every penny you own, you go ahead and see it out anyway and see what happens. They just don't trust anything. They're of an unstable character in mind. Think of that demoniac over there in Matthew or in Mark chapter 5. He was of an unstable mind, to say the least. Sometimes he's got his own voice. Sometimes he has a demon's voice coming out of him, saying things that he doesn't know whether he agrees with that or not, and then whenever he speaks himself, he doesn't know whether what he says is right. Thus, whenever he's delivered of the demon, we are told he was in his right mind again. That's almost a good picture. That's where the word is used there, in a good historical case there, of what it's like. It doesn't mean that you're demon-possessed, but of what it's like when a person goes from a lack of a right mind, a wrong mind in other words, to having a right mind. That person is in his right mind. That means sound-mindedness. That means a Christian virtue. And I think just like with dignity that we discussed last time, being grave, graveness, gravity, it's probably something else that young people are lacking in. Not only young people, but another one of these things that, we could say maybe joy would come more naturally to a younger person than an older person. So maybe some virtues seem to come more easily and naturally to certain age groups, age categories of people. And these last 2 that we've studied, dignity, gravity, and here with sound-mindedness or sobriety, don't seem to come that easily to younger people. And there, obviously, you can see without me elaborating the point why reasons would exist for this not coming to younger people as easily as it would old. Therefore, that means that if you're of the younger persuasion, you have to work on something like this. Being a person that has a sound mind. You're not shaken back and forth. It's kind of the opposite from a frazzled person. Just frazzled. It's kind of the opposite from a haywire person. A zany, zooky type of individual. It's kind of opposed to that. Of a person who just is not sensible, they're not reasonable, or they may try, but in trying, their foot and 4 fingers end up in their mouth whenever they try. You can tell something's not right upstairs with this person. You can watch some people, and because they are lacking something in that most important area of the body between the 2 ears, because they're lacking something there, then whenever they try to do something, try to say something, try to accomplish something in life, what happens? They're not sound-minded. What's so big about that? Is that a good testimony to the saving effect and power of Jesus Christ? To make you a zooky, zany individual. Is that a good testimony to that? That's what a lot of Christians are known for, these haywire, lunatic, fanatic group of people, especially charismatic, who don't know what's going on, and they're just wild. They're off their rocker, we're told. And, that could be said legitimately and scripturally because of some good but strange biblical beliefs that one has. But how many times is that said, not as a slight really against someone's beliefs, but against their manner of conduct, against their behavior? They just turn wild. And the one thing that is supposed to do for us is to give us some stability in our life. An unstable person is not a sound-minded person. Stability would be another synonym for sound-mindedness. That is mental stability. Person has mental stability. Now, I know some people right here in this church who are not mentally stable. So it's not like I'm not talking to people here, or it's not like I'm just talking to tape recorders. I know people who are not mentally stable here. They're not sound-minded. So try to learn as we go along here. The opposite from being unstable, a lack of solidity, fickle-mindedness, always fearing, doubting, questioning, never can seem to be settled in their life. Those people make you nervous whenever you get around them. You'll notice that. They get you nervous, as my grandmother's live-in friend used to pronounce it. Nervous. You make me nervous. Everything made her nervous, especially if you didn't lock the door at 2 in the afternoon. And she's pushing about 85 years of age, like anyone's really going to come after her, you know. But those are generally the ones that are most concerned, the ones that have the least need to be concerned about being attacked. Well, we know they're attacked, and they're attacked by people who are not of a sound mind, that's for sure. Let's come to this next group of words, the naif group of words. N long E-P-H, naif, pronounced like a long A, the naif group of words. Here we're only going to have 2 to look at. This group of words definitely meant originally to be completely free from the use of alcohol. But see, the soap group of words have nothing to do with alcohol or wine at all. The naif group of words originally, historically, etymologically, definitely did. It originally meant, and it was so used by Josephus, so it can be proven this group of words did have this connotation, to be completely free from the influence or the use of alcoholic beverages, such as wine. However, it appears not to be used in this way in the New Testament. That is what the Greek word means. It appears, however, not to be used this way in the Greek New Testament, but rather it's always used in a metaphorical sense. I think I can prove this over in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Just show you some of the ways that you prove certain things, how I come to some of the conclusions that I do. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. Now we'll come back to this here in a moment. But the word, part of the naif group here, is behind the word translated vigilant there. We change sober to sound-mindedness, or sound-minded. The word behind vigilant is this word. Okay, so these are qualifications then for the pastor. He must have this naif word here. He must be vigilant. Okay, does that have anything to do with drinking wine or alcohol there? Not likely, since we have verse 3. Not given to wine. It'd be repetitious then. Therefore, since we know that the word did originally have the meaning of not drinking wine, not being drunk by wine, free from the influence of alcoholic beverages, and since the subject of alcoholic beverages enters into the picture in verse 3, we must do something differently with the term, and that is to end up with a metaphorical translation and therefore a metaphorical meaning behind this term vigilant here in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Now, it's not exactly the same as the above soph group of words. We can prove this because representatives from both groups are used in the same verse. That's always the best way to prove we're talking about similarities, but yet shades of differences as well. For instance, first of all, we're trying to prove that the naif words are not exactly the same as the soph words. They have very similar meanings, but not precisely the same. We prove this by virtue of the fact the words appear, representatives from the 2 groups in the self-same verse. For instance, right here in 1 Timothy 3:2, I've already said we've got a soph word behind sober and a naif word behind vigilant. So a naif word behind vigilant, a soph word behind sober, now sound-minded, means they're not the same. I'll just give you the other references. We'll be looking at these here in a moment. Titus 2:2, you'll have both of the words together again. And 1 Peter 4:7. In those three places, 1 Timothy 3:2, Titus 2:2, 1 Peter 4:7, you have one representative of the Soph group along with one representative of the Naph group. Okay, is it the same as being vigilant or watchful? Now that's what we're given here in 1 Timothy 3:2, vigilant as the translation. Can we translate these Naph words as vigilant or watchful? No, because the Greek words for vigilant or watchful appear in the same verse with Greek words for Naph. That means they can't be the same then. I'll give you some examples. We'll look at these later. 1 Thessalonians 5:6, you have a Naph word and a vigilant or watchful word. And 1 Timothy 5:8. 1 Timothy 5:8. That can't be 1 Timothy 5:8. I must mean 1 Peter 5:8. It's not in Timothy. It must be 1 Peter 5:8. Okay, let's come to these two words that we'll have as representatives of the Naph group. First of all, we have nephaleos. Nephaleos, nephaleos, which appears three times. Nephaleos. It appears here in 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2 as vigilant. It appears in verse 11 as sober. How are we going to translate this? I guess I need to let you know before we move along so you can do it on the way. We're going to translate it sober because there's a definite early connection in the use of the word with sobriety in the literal sense of the term. And you can translate it sober with the understanding that it's translated sober because of an original connection with a lack of influence from the use of alcoholic beverages. However, when we see it, it will be used in a metaphorical sense. So vigilant in verse 2 needs to go to sober. Bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, sober in the Naph sense, which is not an alcoholic sense because verse 3 says not given to wine. And then, notice, here's what I'm talking about. Vigilant, we need to go to sober, and the next word, sober, is a different word. That needs to go to sound-minded. And then down in verse 11, sober needs to stay the same. That's the confusion that you'll find. And then in Titus 2:2, back to that little section, Titus 2:2, they've given us sober, which is what we are looking for, but they give us vigilant in the margin. In 1 Peter 5:8 and 1 Thessalonians 5:6 prove that a Naph word and a vigilant word are different words, and therefore they're not synonyms, and therefore you can't say it can be sober or vigilant. That the aged men be sober, dignified, sound-minded, sound in faith, charity, and patience. So we've done a lot of doctrine just on that one verse there. Sober is fine. Mark out your number 4, whatever you have in your marginal reference. And then final word we have to deal with this morning is just a little short word, nepho. Nepho, nepho. As with the word sophroneo, it's one of the more popular of this group of 8 words in that it appears more times. For instance, it appears in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 6. Now here's one we said we'd come back and look at in answering the question concerning that vigilant KJV translation in 1 Timothy 3:2. Can we translate it as vigilant, watchful? No, because it comes from a different Greek word. Therefore, and we prove that by finding a verse where both are found. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and watch. Be how we have to do it, or be vigilant and be vigilant. No, let us be vigilant, or let us watch and be sober. There's our naif word. The watch is our vigilant word. That's a correct translation there. Let us watch and be sober. Then verse 8. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet the hope of salvation. Sober. We're back to our word sober. Trying to keep it the same as long as it's okay in the context. Using sober, remember, because of its early connection and the meaning of the word with an absence from the use of wine or alcohol. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 5. Now here's a bad translation in the KJV. 2 Timothy 4:5. But watch thou in all things. No, because then we're to our watch or to our vigilant group there. But watch thou, no, but be sober in all things. Now again, don't bog down saying, well, to be sober, that means to watch. That's true. But you've got to keep the watch and the vigilant words the same and keep the sobriety, the sober words the same. 1 Peter 1 and verse 13. Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober. A naif word here. Nepho, be sober, nepho. And hope to the end for the grace. Same book, chapter 4 and verse 7. This verse will be interesting. 1 Peter 4:7, because we have sophroneo and nepho together. We have a soph word. Here's one of our three verses that give us a soph word and a naph word together. But the end of all things is at hand. Be therefore sober. No, we change that to sound-minded. And watch. No, it's not a vigilant term. It's be sober unto prayer. So in other words, be sound-minded and sober so that you can pray. Be sound-minded and sober so that you can pray. He didn't say watch. That's almost built upon the Garden of Gethsemane thing, watch and pray business. Watch and pray. Be therefore sound-minded and sober unto prayer. Just the unto prayer means so that you can pray. And chapter 5 and verse 8. Here's our other proof text against having a vigilant word translated as a sober term. Why? Because you have both together, be sober, be vigilant. They're two different terms. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant. Okay, let's give a little meaning of this term here. It means to be free from the intoxicating effects of bad judgment. Intoxicating being taken in a metaphorical sense then. So that's what the word originally meant here. To be free from the intoxicating effects of sin, bad morals, bad judgment, bad teaching, bad observations. Mental, spiritual, moral alertness. Caution, prudence, circumspection. Maybe even a little better than that, collected, calm, mild, steady, not rash. I do have those down, so I guess I can go over them again. Mental, spiritual, moral alertness, caution, prudence, circumspection. To be steady, to be mild. See, alcohol makes you abrasive. It makes you react too quickly, react in a wrong fashion. So this means be collected, be calm, a non-rash mental framework. Mentally, totally self-possessed, in full control of one's senses. With alcohol, under the influence of alcohol, you don't have full control of your senses. You do things and say things without realizing what you're doing or saying. You don't even realize it. You don't realize how you're impaired in your movements, in your speech, in your behavior. To yourself, you sound normal. You sound fine. But a drunk to a drunk sounds drunk, which sounds okay, which sounds fine. You don't have control of your senses. This term and these references then would have reference to being in full control of one's senses, particularly in the mental arena. So think how this goes back to these various groups of people. Pastors, young women, old men. See, since it touches all those groups, from a young woman to an old man, that probably covers everyone in between them. That means everyone, to go back to our first term, in their mind are to be sensible, reasonable, firm, constant, undivided, unwavering, collected, calm, not rash, cautious, prudent, circumspect, alert, self-possessed, mentally, totally self-possessed. It's no wonder these things are spoken of as Christian virtues. Who wouldn't want things like this? Who wouldn't give sometimes $100,000 to have mental control? People sometimes would give anything to have mental control. And these things they all come as the fruit of the Holy Spirit. They don't cost anything at all. You go to classes and you pay to learn how to walk correctly and speak correctly and think correctly and act correctly. It's all a free gift. I mean, it's going to take work to have it done in your life, but it's all a free gift. You don't have to go to any classes. You don't have to pay any amount of money. Or there's training involved, but there's training through the teaching and through the influence of the Holy Spirit. They're not stars in the sky to be striven after, reached for, but never obtained, of course, money paid for. The fruit of the Spirit that is to come in the Christian life as the Christian learns what Christian maturity is all about and makes some type of an attempt to mature himself or herself in their life. Let me give you a sentence that characterizes all of this together then. Here would be our definition of sound-mindedness on the basis of the soph words and the naph words. We're going to draw both of these together because they both have the idea of sound-mindedness, although we only translate one group as that way. That character of evenly fixed sensibility, wherein one, through calm collection of thoughts, is in full control of one's senses. That character of evenly fixed sensibility. Evenly fixed. It's even, it's fixed, stable, firm, steady, constant, undivided, unwavering. Sensibility of a reasonable nature. Some people are not reasonable. Wherein one, through calm collection of thoughts. We talk about people being collected. That means mentally they're collected. We talk about collecting our thoughts. What does that mean? Well, some of them are over here and some of them are way over here. Just give me a little moment to collect my thoughts. I'm too scattered in too many different directions here. You don't operate very well that way when you're spread out in all these directions. We talk about collecting our thoughts. Therefore, this is a good way to define this. Through calm collection of thoughts is in full control of one's senses. Is in full control of one's senses. You're not a rash person. Now that does not mean that you necessarily have to take, 2 hours to make every decision. You can make a decision quickly, not be rash about it. You just think quickly. You run all the thoughts through your mind, and you think reasonably and sensibly about it, then you make a decision about that. You'll find many times you have to make a decision quickly, or forfeit the opportunity to make any decision at all. The circumstances will make the decision for you. That's different, though, than a person who just hastily and rashly says, I'll do this, or I won't do that, or I like this, or I don't like that. And do they carry through with that? Many times they don't. Someone on the basis of emotions or zeal or something makes a rash, hasty decision or discernment or judgment about something. That's not a sound-minded person who does that. I mean, we've all done that before. We've all made a mistake in doing that and not been able to fulfill our obligation. That should teach us something then. Don't take forever. If someone asks you, will you do something? Don't say, I'll call you back next year and let you know. I'm going to think about this. I want to collect my thoughts about this. Maybe you'll have to call them next year depending on how big the decision is. No, you can make a quick decision, but not a hastily rash decision. I make a big difference between one that's made quickly and one that's made hastily in the rash sense of the term. Too many people are not calm people. They just get hyper about things. They're hyper in their mind about things. We need to learn to be calm, collected. I hope you're not thinking now, through this all, we're painting a picture of a lot of dull people. No, we're not either. We're not painting a picture of dull people at all. Hopefully, we're seeing just the opposite of that. We're seeing people who have their feet on the ground, spiritually, mentally. I mean, I guess mentally is one of the biggest areas we have to deal with. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's the area where we have to deal. Mentally, you can control that area. You have victory and the likeness of Jesus Christ. Some semblance to the likeness of Jesus Christ in that area. You're going to be an okay person then. You're going to make it. You're going to survive. You're going to get by in this world, mentally. I mean, so many of the problems that are out there in the world have as their root cause something mental. Divorce, failure at the job. Mentally, you can't cope with things. The person can if you can mentally cope with something, you always can physically cope with it. Why do some people live longer in a prison camp than others? They go through the same torture. One person keeps his senses collected. He doesn't go insane. How is it someone can live in solitary confinement, under some torturous regime somewhere, and survive that ordeal better than someone on a hijacked plane who's subjected to maybe a couple of weeks of terror and they just go out of their mind? Why is it that we have two different groups of Vietnam veterans? So many cannot cope. They are not stable in their mind. I have a father-in-law who is a Vietnam veteran, a major from the Vietnam War. My wife's father. And he's the most sensible, reasonable, calm, collected, non-rash, down-to-earth person I think that I probably ever met before. That's how sensible he is. Well, he went through the horrors of Vietnam, and he won't talk about it. He won't tell anybody about what he went through and what he saw and what he did. But one thing you have to guess in a hurry is somehow through that all, he kept his head on his shoulders. Now, I admit that'd be difficult. I don't know what the feeling would be like to kill someone else, to have someone else have a gun pointed at you, and either you pull the trigger first or he pulls the trigger first. And you pull the trigger and kill him. How are you going to live with that? How are you going to deal with that? Only a sound-minded person can. Why is it done? And we're not passing judgment on killing people, of course. We're just using that as an example. Too many Vietnam veterans come back and they end up in halfway houses. You'll see them, they're on up in their 40s now, and grizzled, eating garbage out of cans, No good. Why? The war shot their minds. Say, it was the American people who did it. Well, they shouldn't have done what they did to the vets whenever they came back, but it's not the American people. I mean, that was horrible the way veterans from the Vietnam era and war were treated, and still are treated in too many regards today. It's a terrible situation, and it's a blight on the American people. But you could maintain your composure if you maintain your composure through that all. So what, you fought a war and lost. and no one appreciates you for doing your best. You can still survive, but you can only survive if you can get things arranged in your mind. How did the early Christians survive under torturous times, prison terms? How do you keep your sanity? You can talk to people or read the writings of people who've been in situations like that, and they're always doing things with themselves in their mind. You can't just sit there. They play games, they count, they go over old languages they learn, they talk to themselves in their mind, they keep active. That might sound like someone's not in a sound mind, but that's the only way you're going to keep a sound mind in a situation like that. The people who just sit there and rot is what they do. And you know, with some of these hijackings that we've seen and these takeovers of American embassies, and sure, 444 days, that's a long time. That's a long time to not know whether you're going to live or die. But some people of those hostages from the Tehran crisis several years ago, some of those people have dealt with it better than others. Some come and it come back from that and it's ruined your whole life. It's just ruined your life. Why? No stability in your mind. You weren't stable when you went, and the situation didn't help, to say the least. And you came back even worse then. Some people went with mature thinking, the thinking ability type mind. Somehow they lasted. Not only lasted, they endured through it all. They came out on the other side probably having learned some positive things. Why is it we can see on I remember these typical TV shows where it's a young policeman shooting his first person, you know, and just pouring off of him perspiration, shaking, but he knows he's got to pull the trigger anyway. It's a young person, immature. He doesn't have it in his mind, I've got to shoot. There's no big deal about it. I mean, it's a big deal in the sense it might take someone's life, but that's what my job is in the final analysis, is to protect society, is to maintain so-called law and order. And yet he has a difficult time. And then he, along with the Vietnam veteran, we see about, 3 a.m. in the morning, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. Why? With dreams of all the horrors in the past. You know, I thought of that before. What if I'd been through something like that? Would I be tortured by those dreams? I mean, they just come subconsciously in your mind. How would you deal with something like that? Waking up in the middle of the night and seeing this murder that you commit or something in the past, seeing that over and over and over again. You ever gone to bed afraid of something, afraid of what tomorrow holds, afraid of a report, afraid of a job interview or something? And as you lie there in bed, you have to get your thoughts collected and become calm. I mean, I've had it happen to me before. You've been afraid about something. Some thought in the future, some unfolding drama that either is real or at least in your mind it's very real. And all you have to do is get a hold of yourself, start thinking more correctly and more soundly, and you'll end up with a sound mind then. You go right off to sleep, dreamy, dreamy land, peaceful, peaceful land. Not that I can think of a recent time when it's happened, but I know that that's happened to me. I just had to collect my thoughts, calm down, not be rash about the situation, approach it from a more eternal point of view. So what if such and such happens or doesn't happen? In the final analysis, that doesn't matter one way or the other. I'm going to make it to heaven and everything's going to be fine. That's a good way to look at things. Look at them through an eternal telescope, as it were. That this is not the biggest thing in the world. And particularly are we talking about young people in the teenage years, before my conversion experience, and I guess afterwards. But before, I can remember just kind of the thought, the terror of having to give a book report early next morning, first thing in class. I didn't know how to speak back then as I do now. I got nervous back in those days when I don't anymore. A book report. You know, when you're a 11-year-old, you're so concerned about what everyone in the world thinks about you. They could care less whether you exist, but you think that everyone's watching you and that they're all concerned about you, and you're concerned about their concern. That's a miserable, tormenting feeling to go through, that I've got to do everything just right and just perfect. Or maybe some of you, back in those days, if you weighed over 200, you don't have to think of these thoughts then, but that bully who said, I'm going to beat you up tomorrow at school. I remember one very vivid case, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 6th grade, right before I left that school. I think that must be why I left. A big bully. And I mean, he was mean. His friend, as a matter of fact, ended up shooting somebody with a gun, and then he was out rabbit hunting right beside our home and dropped the shotgun, hit the ground, and blew his whole face off. Of course, we all laughed about it in those days, served that bully right, we thought. He caught me and my friend on a bike one time, way out away from home, pulled a big, long Bowie knife on it, said, "I'm going to cut your entrails out." I left my friend. I took off on my bike back home, left my friend, and he got back alive, so he didn't cut his entrails out, but he ended up, just a short time after that, dropping his shotgun and blew his whole face off. And I saw him after that, all plastic surgery to kind of redo his face, and he didn't look very good. We thought it was great that that happened to him. But it was his friend, who was even much bigger than he was, said that he was going to beat me up one day. And I went home. I probably weighed all of 85 pounds, maybe. I was just tortured. I remember the whole night. You don't want to go tell your parents. They think you have a yellow streak down your spine then. So somehow you think, I got to get out of this. You know, I've got to get out of this somehow. I did manage a way to get out of it. But not without a lot of torture, mental torture in your mind. I wasn't sound-minded at all. I might could have been excused for not being sound-minded over that. But not sound-minded. All these torturous things that early life brings. And guess what? Older life can bring it too. Just the thought of old age. Old age. You lose your sound-mindedness you got in middle age now. You didn't have it when you were young. You got it in your 30s and 40s and lost it when you hit about 50. Boy, I'm going to be 60 and 70, and what happens? Senility sets in? Oh, who wants to be senile? Can you picture yourself going around like some dupe telling the same person that story for the 14th time? How embarrassing. To think you, with your bright, clear-thinking self, would ever do that. And so some people get afraid. You know how old people do? They say, "Let me tell you this." And they start telling you. It's the 14th time they've told you. They don't remember. They don't remember. They told you that same story maybe that morning. You picture yourself doing that? Get some sound-mindedness in you now and hold on to it forever. Oh, I know there are all these, they say, well, there's biological explanations and so forth. Well, there may be biological explanations, but there are spiritual cures at the same time. And one cure is to have sound-mindedness, that character of evenly fixed sensibility, wherein one, through calm collection of thoughts, is in full control of all of his senses, particularly in the mental arena, the mental aspect.
My